Everything you were taught about where human knowledge begins is wrong. Not slightly wrong, completely. The official story says civilizations started around 5,000 years ago. Writing, mathematics, architecture, a slow, logical progression built over time. But there's a problem with that story. The monuments don't match it. The proportions don't match it. The maps don't match it. And the closer you look, the more you measure, compare, question, the more the version you were taught starts to fall apart. What the ancients knew shouldn't have been possible for the stage they were supposedly at. And they didn't just know it, they carved it into stone, aligned it to the stars, embedded it inside structures that have outlasted every empire, every war, every attempt to rewrite history. The question isn't whether they left a map. The question is why you were never taught how to read it. Because the map is still there, hidden in plain sight. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where to look. Let's start with something that should bother you more than it probably does. There are structures on this planet that we cannot fully explain. Not because we haven't tried. Because the more rigorously we apply modern engineering and archaeology to them, the more the standard explanations begin to crack under the weight of the evidence. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the most obvious example, but it's also the most misunderstood, because most people think the mystery is about how it was built. The how is interesting, but it's not the point. The point is what it encodes. The pyramid's height, when multiplied by a specific ratio, gives you the circumference of the Earth with a margin of error of less than 1%. Its position on the planet sits almost exactly at the gravitational center of all Earth's landmass. The shafts inside point to precise stellar positions, not the stars as they appear today, but as they appeared thousands of years before the pyramid was supposedly constructed. Someone knew where they were on the planet with a precision we didn't officially achieve until the age of satellites. Let that sit for a moment. Now travel across the ocean. The Maya built their calendrical system around astronomical cycles so precise that their calculation of the Venus cycle, 584 days, differs from our modern measurement by less than 2 hours over a century. They tracked the Pleiades. They predicted solar eclipses. They mapped the movements of the cosmos with a sophistication that took Western science until the 17th century to approach. And they did it without telescopes, without calculators, without any of the technological infrastructure we assume is necessary to reach that level of precision. Here is what's strange. Not just that they knew, but that they knew the same things. The Egyptians and the Maya had no contact with each other. Their languages share nothing. Their geographies are separated by an ocean. And yet both civilizations oriented their most sacred structures to the same stellar positions. Both encoded mathematical constants that describe the dimensions of the Earth. Both built monuments aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy modern architects quietly admit would be difficult to replicate today. The conventional explanation is parallel development, two cultures independently arriving at similar conclusions through similar observations of nature. That explanation is reasonable. It just doesn't account for the precision, because there's a difference between two cultures independently discovering that the Earth is round and two cultures independently encoding the exact circumference of the Earth into the proportions of their most important buildings. One is convergent thinking, the other implies a shared source, something both were reading from, something older than both of them. This is where the conventional narrative runs out of road. Because if you accept the possibility of a shared source, a body of knowledge that predates both Egypt and Mesoamerica, then you have to accept that human history is significantly longer and significantly more sophisticated than the timeline we've been given. But here is where most documentaries stop. They show you the anomaly and leave you with the mystery. We're not going to do that. Because the more important question isn't how they knew, it's what they were actually saying. What was the content of this shared knowledge? What had they decoded about the nature of reality that was so fundamental, so precise, so urgent, that they poured everything they had into making sure it survived? The answer is not what most people expect. It's not a lost technology. It's not a forgotten science in the conventional sense. It's a map of how reality actually works, not how it appears to work from the surface. How it actually works, at the level beneath the physical, beneath the measurable, beneath everything your five senses can directly report. And the reason it was encoded in mathematics and geometry and stellar alignment, rather than written down in plain language, is that mathematics doesn't decay. It doesn't require translation. 2 + 2 = 4 in every culture, in every century, in every language that has ever existed. If you want to send a message across 10,000 years to a people whose language you cannot know, you use the one language that transcends culture entirely. You use number. You use proportion. You use the patterns that nature itself writes into every living system on the planet. That's what the pyramids are. Not tombs, not monuments to power. Messages, written in the only language guaranteed to survive. And we are only now, with the instruments of modern science, modern mathematics, modern psychology, developing the capacity to fully read what was written. The question is whether you're ready to hear what it says. Here is what they decoded. Not a lost technology, not a forgotten engineering technique. Something far more fundamental and far more relevant to the life you are living right now, with a modern mind trying to navigate a reality that feels like it operates by rules nobody ever taught you. The ancients decoded the operating system of reality itself. The first principle: reality is not primarily physical. The physical world, everything you can see, touch, measure, weigh, is not the foundation. It is the surface. It is the output. What generates it, what structures it, what holds it in the patterns we observe, operates at a level beneath the physical, something the ancients called by many names: consciousness, the logos, the Tao, Brahman, the One. Modern physics has a name for the territory where this becomes undeniable: quantum mechanics. At the quantum level, beneath the atomic, beneath everything we experience as solid and fixed, matter does not behave the way the surface world behaves. A quantum particle does not have a fixed position until it is observed. It exists as a field of probabilities and collapses into a single definite state, only at the moment a conscious observer interacts with it. The observer is not separate from the observed. Consciousness is not a passenger in reality. It is a participant in its construction. The ancients said this thousands of years before the double-slit experiment, in different language with different instruments, but with the same precision. And they didn't stop at the observation. They asked the next question, the one that changes everything. If consciousness participates in the construction of reality, what happens when you learn to work with that consciously? This is what initiation was. Not a ceremony, not a symbolic ritual, a technology, a structured process designed to expand the range of reality a human being could perceive, interact with, and, crucially, influence. The ancient Egyptians understood reality as operating across multiple planes simultaneously. The physical world you navigate every day was, for them, the densest and slowest of several interpenetrating dimensions. Beneath it, at a more fundamental level, subtler planes of reality, planes of energy, of archetypal pattern, of pure consciousness, each plane following the same grammar, each accessible to a mind that had been properly prepared. This is not mysticism in the soft sense that word has acquired in modern culture. This is a precise, systematic map of the structure of reality. The Vedic tradition mapped 7 planes. The Kabbalistic tradition mapped 10. The Hermetic tradition mapped 7 as well. Each level corresponding to a different dimension of experience. Different maps. Same territory. What every tradition agreed on, without exception, is that the human being is not confined to the densest plane. That awareness can be trained to move through these levels. That, what we call intuition, synchronicity, inspiration, these are not random neurological events. They are moments of contact between ordinary waking consciousness and the subtler planes the ancients mapped in extraordinary detail. You have felt this, not as a belief, as an experience. The moment when you knew something before you could rationally know it. The dream that described something that hadn't happened yet. The thought of a person seconds before they called. The modern mind files these under coincidence, under the brain playing tricks, under things that can't be explained and therefore shouldn't be taken seriously. The ancient mind filed them under data. Precise, reproducible, navigable data about a reality that operates on more levels than the 5 senses can directly report. Here is the bridge that makes this immediately practical for a modern mind. Jung spent his entire career building it. What the ancients called the subtle planes of reality, Jung called the unconscious. Not as a storage facility for repressed memories, but as a living intelligence. A dimension of mind that communicates through symbol, image, and synchronicity, with access to patterns of meaning the rational surface mind simply cannot see. If you've watched our earlier videos, on the shadow, on active imagination, as direct communication with these deeper layers, you already have a felt sense of what this means. You've already begun to do what the initiates of the ancient mystery schools were trained to do. To listen to what's operating beneath the surface, to take the signals seriously, to treat the inner world not as a byproduct of the outer world, but as a parallel reality, running simultaneously, speaking constantly, waiting to be heard. So what does it actually look like to read the map? Not in an ancient mystery school, not in an initiation chamber carved from stone 3,000 years ago. Here, now, in the life you are actually living, in the body you woke up in this morning, in the ordinary Tuesday that surrounds you right now. Because this is where the ancient wisdom either proves itself or becomes another interesting idea that changes nothing. The ancients weren't building a philosophy for philosophers. They were building a navigation system for human beings moving through a reality that operates on multiple levels simultaneously. And a navigation system is only valuable if you can use it, if it tells you where you are, if it changes the quality of your attention in a way that changes the quality of what you encounter. Here is the first practical principle they encoded, the one that modern culture has the most difficulty receiving. Reality responds to consciousness, not metaphorically, not as a motivational idea, as a structural fact about how the universe is organized, the same principle that quantum mechanics describes at the subatomic level. The observer participating in the collapse of potential into actual operates at the scale of a human life. What you hold consistently in your awareness, what you orient your attention toward with genuine focus and genuine feeling, begins to find correspondence in the world around you. The ancients called this co-creation. They understood that a human being is not a passive recipient of experience. A human being is a generative presence in reality. Your consciousness is not a mirror that reflects the world. It is a lens that, depending on its focus, its clarity, its depth, shapes what the world presents back to you. This is why every ancient knowledge system placed such extraordinary emphasis on the interior life, on the quality of thought, on what you are carrying inside, not what you are performing outside. The Egyptians had a concept called Ka, the vital animating force that extended beyond the physical body and interacted with the environment at an energetic level. The Hindus called it Prana, the life force moving through all living things, responsive to intention and attention. The Chinese called it Qi, the fundamental energy of reality that can be cultivated, directed, and harmonized through conscious practice. Different words, same observation. Something flowing through and between things, through you and through the world around you, that responds to the quality of your consciousness. That can be worked with. That is waiting to be worked with. And here is where this connects directly to work you may have already begun. The shadow work we explored in our first videos isn't just psychological housekeeping, it's preparation for co-creation. Because what you haven't made conscious, what lives in the shadow unexamined, is precisely what leaks into your reality and shapes it without your knowledge or consent. The patterns you keep encountering that seem to arrive from nowhere. The situations that repeat with eerie precision. The relationships that follow the same arc, regardless of who the other person is. Jung called this projection. The ancients called it karma, not as punishment, but as the precise mechanism by which unexamined interior patterns generate corresponding exterior experiences. As within, so without. This is not abstract. This is the most practical thing anyone has ever told you. You are not separate from what you're experiencing. You are in dynamic, continuous co-creative relationship with it, which means the quality of your attention is not a private matter. It is a generative force, the instrument through which you participate in the construction of your experience, whether you know it or not. The ancients built entire civilizations designed to help human beings develop that attention consciously, to clean the lens, to align the interior with the exterior, to bring the unconscious patterns into the light where they could be seen and worked with intentionally. This is what initiation meant. Not a ceremony you underwent once, a continuous practice, a daily commitment to the quality of your own consciousness. because that quality was understood to be the single most consequential variable in the life you were living. And right now, in this moment, that practice is as available to you as it was to the initiate standing in the chamber at Karnak 3,000 years ago. The tools are different. The language is different. The cultural container is completely different, but the territory is identical. And you already have the most important instrument, the one carved above the door at Delphi, the one Jung spent 40 years mapping, the one this channel exists to help you develop. Yourself, examined, honest, willing. That is the beginning of reading the map. There is a language the universe speaks that has nothing to do with words. You've encountered it. You just may not have had a framework for it, a way of taking it seriously that didn't require abandoning your rationality or adopting beliefs you weren't sure you held. That framework exists. It's old, it's precise, and it works. The ancients called it the language of correspondence, the principle that reality communicates through pattern, through repetition, through timing, through the appearance of specific symbols at specific moments in a life. Not randomly, not as coincidence dressed up as meaning, but as the actual mechanism by which the deeper levels of reality make contact with the surface, where your ordinary consciousness operates. Jung spent years documenting this. He called it synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence, the event that carries no causal explanation but arrives with a precision that the word coincidence cannot account for. He didn't invent the concept. He translated it, took what the ancients had mapped in symbolic language and gave it a name a modern mind could hold without flinching. Think about your own experience. You've been wrestling with a real decision, the kind that keeps you awake. And something appears. A sentence in a book opened at random. A conversation overheard that addresses your exact situation. A dream that shows you, in image rather than logic, precisely what you needed to understand. A person who arrives at the exact moment you needed what they carry. The rational mind wants to explain these moments away. Probability, selection bias, the brain finding patterns in noise, but something else in you, the part that was awake before the rational mind learned to dominate, knows this explanation doesn't account for the precision, doesn't account for the timing, doesn't account for the feeling, unmistakable and immediate, that something larger is operating, that something is the map, speaking, the universe communicating through the only language that can bridge the gap between the deeper levels of reality and the surface of ordinary life. And here is what makes this immediately practical. This language can be learned, not passively received, waiting for signs and interpreting them with your ordinary rational mind. That produces confusion and projection in equal measure. Actively cultivated, deliberately developed, through practices designed to quiet the surface noise and open the channels of perception through which this deeper communication flows. The first practice is attention, not the scattered, reactive attention perpetually pulled toward the next notification, the next demand. A different quality, gathered, still, directed inward and held there long enough for the subtler signals to become audible above the noise. Every ancient tradition had a method for this. The Egyptians had contemplative practices in the temples. The Greeks had philosophical meditation. The Vedic tradition had dhyana, the sustained, unbroken flow of attention toward a single object. The Hermetic tradition had interior silence and symbolic contemplation. Different languages, different cultural containers, the same training, the capacity to receive. The second practice is interpretation. The language of correspondence doesn't speak in linear argument. It speaks in image, in symbol, in the sudden appearance of something that carries emotional charge without obvious rational explanation. Developing symbolic literacy means learning to read the meaning carried by specific images and recurring themes. This is exactly what active imagination develops. The ability to enter genuine dialogue with images arising from the deeper layers of the psyche. To treat them not as random neurological events, but as communications from an intelligence that has access to more of your situation than your conscious mind does. The third practice is response, because this language is not a monologue. It's a dialogue, and a dialogue requires a response. When you notice a pattern repeating, the same situation in different forms, the same emotional quality through different doors, the ancient map says this is a communication. Something in your own psyche is generating this pattern through the mechanism of co-creation. And it will keep generating it with increasing intensity until you turn and face it, until you respond. The map speaks constantly to everyone, without exception. The difference between the person who navigates life with depth and accuracy and the person who feels perpetually lost is whether they have learned to read it. There is a reason this knowledge went underground, and understanding why it disappeared is essential to understanding why it's coming back. And why it's coming back now in this particular moment in history to minds like yours. The suppression wasn't primarily an act of malice, it was an act of translation failure. When ancient knowledge systems encountered cultures that had lost the framework to receive them, cultures organized around external authority, around the idea that reality is fixed and the human being's role within it essentially passive. The deeper teachings became dangerous, not because they were wrong, because they were threatening. A human being who understands that consciousness co-creates reality, who knows how to read the map, who can navigate by the language of correspondence, is not easily controlled, not easily told what to believe, not easily kept in the position of passive recipient of a reality handed down by external authority. This is why the mystery schools went underground. This is why the Hermetic teachings were encoded in alchemical symbolism only the initiated could read. Why the Neoplatonic philosophers were pushed to the margins. Why the Gnostic traditions, which taught precisely this direct, personal access to the deeper levels of reality, were systematically suppressed. The knowledge didn't die. It went underground, passed between individuals rather than institutions, encoded in symbols rather than statements, preserved by people who understood that their society had lost the framework to receive it openly. The Library of Alexandria didn't burn by accident. Approximately 400,000 scrolls, gone. Not all contained this knowledge, but enough did that the loss represented a genuine discontinuity in the chain of transmission. A moment where the thread nearly broke. Nearly. Because this knowledge cannot be fully destroyed. It isn't stored only in books. It's stored in the structure of reality itself, in the patterns that keep appearing regardless of whether anyone is teaching them. In the symbols that keep surfacing in dreams and art and individual human experience across every culture that has ever existed. Jung discovered this independently. Working with thousands of patients over decades, he kept finding the same symbols appearing in people who had no knowledge of mythology, no training in ancient symbolism, no contact with any tradition that had encoded these images. The symbols weren't being transmitted culturally. They were being generated directly, arising from what Jung called the collective unconscious. The layer connecting every human being to the same underlying patterns, the same archetypal grammar, the same map, regardless of when or where they were born. This is what the ancients had called the Akashic record, the Logos, the universal mind. And here is what this means for right now. In the last 30 years, accelerating dramatically in the last decade, something has been shifting. The knowledge that went underground is surfacing again. Not through institutions, through individuals, through people who encountered a fragment of the old map and felt something activate that they couldn't name but couldn't ignore. You are almost certainly one of those people. But something more specific is happening in this historical moment that deserves to be named directly. We are living through a collective crisis of meaning. The frameworks that organized Western civilization for the last several centuries, the purely materialist view of reality, the reduction of the human being to a biological machine in a meaningless universe, are visibly failing. Not just philosophically, practically, in the mental health statistics, in the epidemic of purposelessness, cutting across every demographic. The ancient knowledge is returning because it is needed. Because a civilization that has forgotten that consciousness participates in reality, that has severed the connection between outer world and inner world, is a civilization that has lost its navigation system. And lost people look for maps. You are looking for a map. And the most important thing I can tell you, the thing every tradition we've explored agrees on, is that the map you're looking for is not outside you. It never was. The outer map, the pyramids, the stellar alignments, the mathematical constants encoded in stone, was always pointing inward, always saying, this structure you see in the cosmos, in the geometry of nature, in the patterns of history, this same structure lives in you, is you. The ancient wisdom and the modern mind are not in conflict. They are waiting to meet in you. Before we go further, and there is further to go, I want to stop here for a moment. If you've made it to this point in the video, something in you recognized what this material is pointing at. You didn't stay for entertainment. You stayed because these ideas are touching something you've carried for a long time, a sense that reality has more depth than the version you were handed, that the patterns in your life are saying something you haven't yet learned to fully hear, that there is a way of navigating existence that is more precise, more alive, more connected to what you actually are than anything the mainstream culture has offered you. That recognition matters. Don't dismiss it. If this channel is giving language to what you've been carrying, if these videos are helping you develop the instruments the ancients described, I want to invite you to subscribe, not as a favor to me. Because what we're building here is a body of work designed to be explored in sequence. Each video opens a door that the next one walks through. And if you're at the door this video just opened, there are rooms ahead that I think you'll want to enter. Subscribe, turn on notifications, come back. What comes next is worth staying for. Now, let's talk about what the ancient knowledge actually asks of you. Because this is the point where most people, even the ones who have received everything we've explored so far with genuine openness, step back. Where the intellectual appreciation of ancient wisdom meets the much harder question of personal application. Where the map stops being interesting and starts being demanding. The ancients were not offering a philosophy to admire from a distance. They were offering a practice, a discipline, a set of demands on the quality of your attention, the honesty of your self-examination, and the courage of your response to what that examination reveals. And the first demand, the one that every tradition without exception places at the beginning of the path, is the most confronting. You have to be willing to see what you actually are. Not what you perform, not what you present, not the version of yourself that you've constructed for the world to see. The actual interior landscape, with its contradictions, its unresolved patterns, its places of genuine darkness and genuine brilliance, its wounds that have been running the show from the unconscious without your conscious awareness or consent. This is what the shadow work we've explored in this channel is preparing you for. Not as an end in itself, but as the necessary first movement of something much larger. You cannot co-create consciously with patterns you haven't seen. You cannot read the map accurately when significant portions of your own psyche are operating outside your field of vision, projecting their contents onto the external world and experiencing those projections as if they were simply reality. Shadow work clears the lens. Active imagination develops the listening. And what we've explored today, the grammar of reality, the language of correspondence, the mechanics of co-creation, gives you the cosmological framework within which all of that interior work takes on its full meaning. These aren't separate teachings, they are sequential layers of a single map. You begin with self-knowledge, the clearing of the lens. You develop the quality of attention, the capacity to receive. You learn the language of correspondence, symbolic literacy through which the map speaks. And then, gradually, through practice, you begin to operate as a conscious co-creator. Not controlling reality the way the ego imagines control, but participating in it with awareness, bringing your interior state into alignment with the patterns you wish to generate, responding to what appears with clarity rather than unconscious reactivity. This is what the ancients meant by the initiated human being, not a superhuman, not a mystic removed from ordinary life, a person who has learned to read the map, who navigates the same terrain everyone else navigates, the same losses and uncertainties and ordinary Tuesdays, but with instruments that most people don't know they possess. If you want to go deeper into the first layer of this work, the shadow, the lens clearing, our first videos on this channel will take you there directly. And if you've already walked that ground with us, if the shadow work has opened something and you're ready for the next layer, stay with me. Because what the ancients saved for last, what every mystery school held back until the student was genuinely prepared, is what we're about to explore. The final thing the map reveals, the one that changes not just how you understand reality, but how you experience being alive within it. We started this video with a problem. The monuments don't match the story. The proportions don't match the story. The maps don't match the story. And we said that by the end of this video, you would know exactly where to look. Here is where you look. Not at the pyramids, not at the stellar alignments, not at the mathematical constants encoded in stone across 5 continents and 10,000 years of human history. Here, inside, the entire external map. Everything the ancients built, everything they encoded, everything they aligned to the stars and carved into the most permanent materials they could find, was always pointing in one direction: inward, toward the same territory Jung spent 40 years mapping, toward the interior landscape that every mystery school in human history was designed to help you navigate, toward the one place where the grammar of reality and the grammar of you become the same thing. The ancients didn't decode reality from the outside, they decoded it from the inside out. They understood that the human being is not a small thing inside a large universe, passively subject to forces beyond its comprehension. The human being is a microcosm, a complete expression of the same patterns that structure the cosmos. Containing within itself, within the depths of the psyche, within the layers of consciousness, the mystery schools were designed to develop the full grammar of what is real, as above, so below, not a metaphor. A precise technical description of what you are, which means everything we've explored in this video: the planes of reality, the language of correspondence, the mechanics of co-creation, the map that speaks through synchronicity and symbol, and the recurring patterns of a human life. All of it is accessible to you, right now. Not because you have earned special access, because you are built from the same material as the map, because the instrument and the territory are not separate. They never were. This is what changes when you genuinely receive this, not your circumstances, not immediately. What changes is your relationship to all of it, the quality of your presence within your own experience, the depth from which you respond rather than react, the increasing capacity to recognize, in the events and encounters of an ordinary life, the language of something larger speaking, and to respond with awareness rather than the unconscious reflexes of a person who doesn't know they're being addressed. The ancients built the pyramids to last 10,000 years. They aligned them to stars that would still be there 10,000 years later. They encoded their knowledge in the only language guaranteed to survive every catastrophe, every collapse, every attempt to erase what they knew. And then they waited. For you. Not for a civilization, not for an institution. For you, specifically. In your particular life, with your particular questions, at this particular moment when something older and truer and more precise is pushing back up through the surface of a culture that had forgotten it was built on top of something vast. The map found you. You've been standing in front of it your entire life. Every moment of inexplicable recognition, every synchronicity too precise to dismiss, every dream that showed you something your waking mind hadn't managed to see, every pattern that kept repeating until you finally turned and faced it. That was the map, speaking directly to you, and now you have a framework for it, a vocabulary, a set of instruments, being developed video by video, that give you increasing capacity to receive what has always been transmitted. The ancients decoded reality and left the map hidden in plain sight. Now you know where to look. If something in this video landed for you, share it with 5 people who are ready. You know who they are. Subscribe and leave a real comment below, not a reaction. Tell me what this opened. Tell me what question you're sitting with that you didn't have before you pressed play. Tell me what you want to go deeper on next. And if you want to begin the interior work the ancient map is pointing toward. Our videos on the shadow and on active imagination are where that work begins. The shadow is the first movement. Active imagination is the first practice. Together they open the territory that everything in this video has been describing. That is where the path starts. Not in the pyramids. In you, the ancients decoded reality. Now it's your turn.